Welcome to the Tippie Leads podcast, stories from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business that will change the way you work and lead. I'm your host, Nick Westergaard. I teach at Tippie and lead our Story Lab program. Each season of Tippie Leads, we focus on a grand challenge in today's changing world of work. This season, we're looking at how you can be the CEO of your life. To be the CEO of your life, first you have to know where it is you're going. That question is at the heart of this week's episode. How do you set a vision for yourself? To help us think this through, we're joined by Amy Colbert. Amy is a professor of management and entrepreneurship and a University of Iowa Distinguished Chair. Her research focuses on how people connect with their work in ways that motivate and sustain them. She's also deeply interested in identity transitions, which is the focus of her Substack, Who Am I Now? Exploring what it means to reinvent yourself. After that, we'll hear from Tippie student Michael Mannion, who knows something about having to redefine your vision when life doesn't go according to plan. And as always, we'll bring it all together with a final tip E just for you. Ready? Let's get started. Amy, I am excited to talk about how we can be better CEOs of our own life. You know, I asked you years ago when I started teaching leadership communication and story at Tippie, if you had a simple definition of leadership, and I will confess to every now and then when I tell this story, I joke that asking for a simple definition from someone with an academic background can be a bit of a challenge, but it was a challenge that you accepted and delivered on, because you said something to the effect of, creating a vision and inspiring others to follow it. And I come back to that constantly. How does that apply to vision casting for yourself?
Oh, that's a great question, Nick. And thank you for remembering that. I remember that conversation too. I sometimes apologize to my leadership students because I'm like, okay, we're going to have 8 weeks together and I'm going to break this down into like 5 words, right? Set directions and list others. This is what good leaders do. But I think this is also what effective individuals do as well. And that setting direction part works somewhat similarly to the way that it works in organizational leadership. Essentially, what you're doing when you set a vision is providing yourself with some direction. Where am I trying to go? But ultimately, I think the more powerful part of vision is that it answers the question, why? Why do I get up every day? Why do I feel jazzed and engaged to do the work that I do, to do the work in the community that I do, to interact with my family in the way I do? That all comes down to a good understanding of your vision. And so just like organizations use these statements to make sure that everybody knows where we're going, but also to get them excited about it, I think that happens in our lives as well.
So when we talk about organizational leadership, setting a vision is a big part of that. But when we get home in life, we get really task-oriented really fast and sometimes miss out on the big picture vision. And so many of us are so very busy. How can we do better at looking at that big picture in our lives as well?
So I love that you use the words looking at the big picture in our lives, because I do think physical representations are really helpful. I'm not going to tell people to make a vision board, although for some people, this is the way that they create a visual representation. But I think that simply setting your vision down in words is the first step. And this doesn't have to be something you think about or do every day, every week, every month. It's something that I revisit at the beginning of every year. And so for me as an academic, I operate on academic years. I usually do this in August. For most people in the world, this is probably a January 1st task, right? what is it that I would like to accomplish, but not this year? I want you to project out further. There's good research that suggests that putting yourself in a time machine and going out 5 or 10 years, doing things like writing a newspaper headline about yourself that would be applicable at that time point, or even thinking about what people will say about you at a retirement party. Doing that and then capturing it in a few words is a very effective way to make sure that you've got that North Star or that touch point, as some people would say. And then I think it is about pulling it into your regular planning cycles as well. So I'm a bullet journaler. I like to do this in with pretty pens and washi tape, and I write down kind of where I'm going and my vision for the next 5 years usually. And then I think about, okay, what does that mean for this year? What does it mean for this quarter or this month? And so that feeds through all of the planning that I do. I like to make sure that I'm keeping track of the fact that I'm spending at least some part of my time on activities that will take me in that direction.
So when we last talked on the podcast, and we'll link up to that episode, and I frequently point out that it's one of our most popular episodes to date because it is about that question of finding meaning at work. And in the MBA classes that I teach, when I have them through the lens of communication, looking at a values exercise, I often get the question of, okay, is it me at work, or is it me in my own personal life? And my answer is, ideally there's not too big of a disparity between those. But I wonder if you could talk about the relationship between that vision for yourself and at work, if there is a disparity, if it does feel push and pull in vision casting.
Yes, I agree with you, Nick. I think when those are congruent, people tend to feel more whole, more authentic. It's easier to feel like you're not putting on one hat and taking off another at the end of the day. However, different people have different relationships to their work. And so for someone like me, I identify highly as being a professor. I enjoy it. I love it. I even describe it as a calling. And so my personal vision has a lot to do with my work vision because that is a dominant role for me right now. And for other people, work may be a way to make a living. And for them, their personal vision may be completely different. This was the case with my mom. My mom was a bookkeeper for a lumber yard after my brother and I got old enough to take care of ourselves. And she liked her work. She liked the people that she worked with. But the things that she did that really felt like they were moving her in the right direction had more to do with the work that she did in the community. And so for her, her vision was about impacting people outside of the workplace. And that is okay too. There are many people for whom finding that source of meaning outside of work means that they are satisfied and happy at work. They can do their jobs, but they find that pure meaning somewhere else.
So you talked about that transition of your mom's and revisiting this work annually. Your Substack, Who Am I Now, focuses on identity and self-narrative. How does understanding yourself and how you may change connect with setting and even adapting that vision?
Yes. I think about identity as the answer to the question, who am I? And that's a really big descriptor, right? That could be the roles that I play. It could be the values that I hold. It could be more about my personality and my style and interacting with others. Identity includes all of those things, right? And so if you think about setting a vision, where are we going to go in the next 5 years? Setting a vision that is identity consistent will make it feel as though you're doing something that is what you were meant to be doing. It aligns with your values. It leverages your strengths. It allows you to be a person in the world that is the same as the idea of yourself that you have in your head. And so I think thinking about and understanding what our identities are allows us to create a consistent vision. The thing that I've been exploring in my Substack, though, is that sometimes that identity changes. And it may change because we choose to change. We decide to have a family or to try a new career. It may also change for reasons that we didn't choose. So, you know that I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease about 5 years ago, and that has shifted my identity in ways that have made me revisit the vision that I have. If you had asked me in early 2020, before I was diagnosed, my vision was about broadening my scope of impact in university leadership, going from the department and exploring the opportunity to do things at a higher level. With the Parkinson's diagnosis, that became not as reasonable for me to do, because we are happiest when our visions are a stretch, but they are achievable. We want to have a goal in mind that we have some efficacy that we can get to. And so I started to think about, okay, what does that look like over the next 5 years, especially given that I didn't want my values to change. I still wanted to be curious and compassionate and making a contribution. Those are my 3 core values. And I wasn't going to do that from the role as a provost at the university, but I could still do that in other ways. And so I shifted that picture of the future, but in ways that still respected and allowed me to live out those values.
I think that's a really powerful story, and I think one that many can identify with, with those changes that we didn't plan on. And I'm someone that, with my own mindset of being very organized and not a bullet journaler, but I'm a sticky note list maker. And one of my biggest problems that I run up against in life is that wasn't on the list. That's not how I thought this was supposed to go. And that can be a huge disruption for people. If there's folks out there listening, whether it's a change in caring for parents, in a diagnosis, in moving, what is something? Is there? Again, the list maker in me said plan of attack, and that's probably not the right way to look at that. But what for a crisis of identity that calls that into question? How can we, and I'm going to say it again, take a step back and realign?
Yes. Oh, such a good question, and very practical. The more that I've been writing about these identity transitions, the more people have reached out to say, I know you're writing about Parkinson's. I'm experiencing a move or an aging parent or the loss of a child. Very, very significant events that have rocked my foundation. I don't think I even know who I am anymore. And that is a really difficult place to be. That can result in being stuck. I am going to advise people who are in that moment, first of all my empathy. It is a really difficult moment to be in. And there is growth that happens in that middle space, in that in between. Researchers call this being in liminality. So I'm between one identity and another, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do next. And one of the things that I, also as a list maker, want to do is get out of that. I want to be able to put my vision down and be like, nope, I'm back on my quarterly plan. Here I am. I had to learn how to stay in liminality for a little bit. It was very fruitful, and it allowed me to do things that weren't rushing into something new just because I was like, okay, I could do this. And that way I would have a new defined identity. I would be able to create a new vision, but it wasn't quite right. And I had to just allow myself to be open to the things that might appear without me having planned them out in my bullet journal. And that was hard for me. But as I say, I did a lot of writing and journaling during that time, and it allowed me to see multiple paths forward, multiple ways that I could live out the next few years of my life. And that gave me a sense of autonomy. Now I get to choose which of those. Not, oh, this diagnosis pushed me out of this identity, but now I'm back in the driver's seat and I'm going, okay, it's not that, but it could be any of these 5 things. Now I get to choose.
It's interesting because, fellow list maker, it seems like the practice of writing, even in the previously it had been making a list towards a specific goal of how I thought, but your writing practice around the Substack, other programs that you have been engaging things, it almost seems like the practice of writing in some capacity, whether it's journaling, list making, is important to setting one's vision. Am I being too linear with the act of writing, or is there something with self capture, with capturing the thoughts?
I absolutely think there is. And that is partly because visioning is complex, right? It's not something you're going to just sit down on New Year's Day and scratch out your vision. When we look at the process that organizations use to create visions, they're constantly scanning the environment, looking for opportunities or threats, thinking about how to navigate those and whether the vision needs to shift. Oftentimes, we're thinking a level below the vision as well. So a vision is kind of the broad descriptor of where an organization is going. Strategic objectives bring that to life. And those are absolutely going to change as different aspects of our environment change. So I do think that when things are complex, writing them down, downloading your brain onto paper, allows you to see connections that you might not see otherwise. And so this gives you a chance to move things around, play with it a little bit. I think discussing is also, that's the second piece I would say is important. If you have someone that you can talk to about your vision, writing, making sense of, but then saying it out loud to someone else and having them react also deepens that cognition around the complexity. Your thinking goes deeper.
So coming full circle, the other half of your definition of leadership beyond the vision is inspiring others to follow that same vision. So when it comes to self-leadership, how do we inspire action towards a vision for ourselves?
Yes, yes.
A
So
difficult and sometimes obstinate party.
exactly. Probably a bigger challenge than motivating others, honestly, right? I think that's so true. And you have to don't dedicate time to it, right? You have to make time in your schedule to say, I'm working on things that are moving me forward. I'm going to say 3 ideas. Maybe it will end up being 4, but 3 always feels like the right number. The first thing that I would say is that as you're creating your vision, you do want it to be something that you've thought through in terms of its motivating potential for you. Does it connect to your values? Does it leverage your strengths? Is it really crisp and vivid? Or is the phrasing something that you're like, I just kind of love saying this? Like, this is what I want to do. And organizations that do this well, 3M, right, who make Scotch tape and Post-it notes to solve unsolved problems innovatively. Right? This is kind of a catchy, motivating thing to think about. And so capturing that in a way that connects to the intrinsic motivation is the first thing that I would say. The second thing I would say is make it cascade down into your planning. I talked about doing this, thinking about every month. Maybe grading papers doesn't feel like a real vision-based activity for me. Although sometimes I can make it feel that way, like I'm giving feedback and I like to, that's a piece of it. But I do make sure there are core activities in my plan for the month that really are attached to that vision. Am I spending time mentoring? For me is a big one right now. That is the way that I'm trying to make an impact more so than I am able to do in a formal leadership role. So in the planning stage, and then I think it is capturing it. I use a practice. I've talked about being a person who keeps a done list, right? The things that you've accomplished. Also, I'm taking a journaling class that's introduced me to an old Italian practice called Zibaldone. And Zibaldone is you create your own categories that you want to track throughout a week or a month. And so I keep track of delights. I keep track of hard lessons. I keep track of a category that I sometimes call Amying, right? This is when I feel like I am really being myself and living out that vision that I've created for myself. So keeping track of the things that you're doing also allows you to put this in practice, because seeing progress is motivating, and that is going to keep you moving toward that vision you set.
I'm Kira Ellerbrook. I'm a student at Tippie and producer on the podcast. I am a peer mentor for Story Lab as well. And because today we're answering the big question about identity, we've chosen Michael Mannion's story, where he tells us of his experience being rejected from his university of choice.
What will you do in life? That is a question that I struggled to answer ever since I was a young boy. Will I be a painter, an artist, a singer, an actor? All of these professions seem like really fun things to do, but felt less achievable as I got older. I remember being on the bus in middle school, being scared that I didn't have an answer to this question. And then that anxiety got even worse as I was a junior in high school, watching my peers apply to colleges. I thought to myself, how was I supposed to know what college to apply for if I didn't even know what I wanted to do in life? So I decided to follow in my brother's footsteps and apply to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Now, the thing about me is I tend to procrastinate. And I procrastinated so much so that I waited to the very last day to submit this important application. So, as I was racing against the clock to submit my essay, I was scared that it wasn't good enough. And then at 11:59, I clicked the submit button and was able to take a deep breath as I received the application confirmation. Now was the waiting game. I spent a whole 2 months looking in my inbox awaiting this decision. And then finally, the day arrived. I rushed to open up this email and was met with 2 words that I'll never forget. Status denied. I thought, how could this be? This was my path in life. I was supposed to go to Illinois like my brother. So I did anything I could to control that and reject this decision. I called up the admissions office and pleaded if there was anything I could do to change their decision. The lady in the office explained to me that there was an appeal process that I could do to maybe change this decision. So that's what I did for the next month. I perfected this essay. I had it reviewed by my peers and my teachers and made it perfect. I spent countless hours trying to explain why I was a good candidate for Illinois. And then I realized after all of that I had received incorrect information from the admissions office and that this essay I spent so much time on had been all for nothing. This led me to a very dark time in my life, and I was lost and didn't know what to do. One day, one of my high school friends asked, "Hey, why not apply to Iowa?" And I thought, I've actually been to this university before, and I thought it was a beautiful place to go to. So I went ahead and applied. And 1 week later, I received a different email. This time it read, "Congratulations, you're a Hawkeye." Now, I was excited to finally feel like I belonged somewhere, but I didn't quite answer the question, what will I do in life? So I spent my first year as an undecided major and took the course Major in Career Explorations. Now, this course helped me learn a lot about myself and my interests, and this was my introduction to marketing. I found it to be a perfect blend between the creativity that I wanted to do as a child, as well as the business elements that my brother had been doing at Illinois. Ironically enough, I found out that the University of Iowa is the only Big Ten university that offers a marketing institute. And what the Marketing Institute is a very selective program that only allows 20 applicants each year to work with real-life companies with marketing problems. So that was my goal. My junior year, I would apply to this institute and try so hard leading up to the years to expand my knowledge. I connected with my classmates, with my professors. I joined student organizations to do anything I could that involved marketing. And finally, as my junior year came, I applied to the Marketing Institute. And I'm happy to say that I was accepted, and I am just wrapping up my first semester within the program. I realize now that rejection is a part of life, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, just last week, I received an email from an internship I had applied to. It read, "We thank you for your application, but we have decided to go with other applicants for this position." However, this time, I didn't try to appeal this decision. I didn't fall into a deep state of depression. Instead, I realized that this rejection doesn't make me any less of who I am. Rather, it helps me understand more about myself and know that there are more unknown possibilities down the road in my life. Thank you.
Let's go back to our guest one last time for a final tip E for you to remember in your work.
My final tippy is to consider ways that you can approach visioning that allow you to achieve two seemingly opposite outcomes at the same time. I call this being a both and kind of leader. Because what I want you to do is I want you to plan. I want you to dream. I want you to think about that future, write the newspaper headlines, write your retirement party speeches, and be intentional. And I want you to be open, because sometimes the path takes a shift. Sometimes something new presents itself that we haven't planned for. And if you are open to those possibilities, it can take you in a direction that maybe wasn't precisely what you planned, but is going to be precisely what you needed at that time.
And that's a wrap on our first episode of Season 4 of Tippie Leads. Big thanks to Amy Colbert for helping us to see our vision more clearly, and to Michael Mannion for having the courage to share such a personal story on finding a new direction forward. As always, thanks to Kira Ellerbrook for producing our story segment, and to the Tippie Marketing Communications team for supporting the show. Next, we're turning vision into action. Professor Rob Rauenhorst joins us to talk about our habits, the daily systems that separate the people who have goals from the people who actually get them done. One habit to work on? Making sure you tune in to the next episode of Tippie Leads. I'll see you there. This has been Tippie Leads, a podcast from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business. To learn more about our faculty guests, their research, and more, go to tippie.uiowa.edu/Tippie Leads. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or coworker. Or better yet, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you like to get your podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And if you're feeling generous, consider leaving us a rating or review to help others find the show. This is Nick Westergaard signing off. On behalf of everyone at Tippie, thanks for listening, and go Hawks!